I want to cover how to properly put on teeth on a bucket. There's a couple different styles of buckets you can see, or you could have. And the first style is a pin style tooth. And what that means is that the shank on the bucket will have a hole for a pin that would hold the tooth in place. This is a John Deere 46 backhoe on a John Deere 2032R. And the way these work on the John Deere buckets is there's no pin for the tooth to be held in place. You actually have to press the tooth on. And there's a couple ways you can do that, but what I find the easiest way that you can do this relatively quickly and without a lot of work is you can use a ball joint splitter. So this is nothing more than an automotive ball joint splitter. So if you have a front end set for a car or an automotive front end set, you have a lot of different ways where you can press these teeth on. And for this size tooth, what I found works well is the ball joint tool, right? This is a splitter for ball joints. All you have to do is put this over the tooth, and then you center the end of the press area over the round hole on the tooth itself, and simply turn it with a wrench. And you can turn it down pretty hard, but you don't have to, because there's two sides on this, and as soon as you start to turn this, it'll press this tooth together. So you want to do it, on one side, get it pretty snug, and then go a couple full turns with a wrench. That'll press it in on one side, and then you want to put the tool on the other side and do the same thing on this side. And what you're left with is a nice pressed area, round area that is kind of squeezing right where it should be on the shank. So this takes about 5 minutes a tooth, so this is one way you could do it. It doesn't damage the tooth at all. It doesn't distort the tooth or break the tooth at all, and it really holds it on there nicely. This one here, I pressed it on, and you can see what you get for a fit there. You'll see the shank behind it. It's just squeezing the area in the shank where you're supposed to be for that tooth. And it's really on there nice and snug. There's not a lot of play in it at all. This one has no play. So that's what you want. You want to press it on, and you want to put it on pretty snug so it doesn't move around too much. And the whole concept with this method is that you can easily get that tooth off if it breaks. So what will happen is, over a couple year period, if you use the backhoe quite a bit, that tooth, believe it or not, will look like that. That one needs to be changed. The old tooth is still on there, but most of it has broken off, and really all you're left with is the base. So what you're seeing here on this old tooth is you're seeing this part of the tooth left, where this is really the area on the shank of the tooth that's going to do a lot of your digging for you, especially if you have a lot of clay in the ground. You'll need something sharp to kind of pierce the clay, and then you can easily get that clay out of the ground. So this is the old one. It's completely worn down, needs to be removed and then replaced with something like this. So that's how you would put the tooth on. The other big question you would have, of course, is how do you get that old tooth off that shank? Well, what you're going to want to use is an air chisel to do that. So I usually use an air chisel set up with a nice sharp bit that I can take, and I can wedge the bit just underneath the old tooth in the shank. And you want to do this, in this direction. Try to get the area that's pressed around the shank to not be pressed around it, if you know what I mean. So you're going to try to get that air chisel in between the shank and the tooth, which will then pull it back out and do just the opposite of what you've done with the ball joint tool over here. Once you do that, it'll start to move. It'll start to wiggle, and then it's just a matter of hitting it with the air chisel enough to get it wide enough open where it's free enough just to pop right off the shank. So that's what you want to do. Air chisel the old tooth off the shank, and then you want to use something like a ball joint splitter to press the new tooth on the shank. So that's a real easy method. And I would say to do this whole bucket, if it had 3 teeth on it still and they would all need to be changed, it's about an hour, because you have to take the air chisel with the old teeth and get those off. That's what takes all the time. Putting the new ones on is really easy. You just use the tool and you press it together. So that's my advice on backhoe buckets that have no pins going through them. Now, if you've got the pin style shanks and teeth, it's really easy, right? Because your pin's just going to go through the hole, and you're just going to press the pin in there to keep that tooth on. But that's not the case with the John Deeres. They all have a pressed on. Most of them have a pressed on tooth design, and that's just how they are. Okay. I hope this helps you if you're going to try this. And again, it's about an hour, and I would say it's very doable. Definitely if you have a front end mechanic set for automotive, and also if you have an air chisel, you definitely can do this in an hour yourself. So this is, I wanted to show the finished product. When you press these on, you'll have the 3 teeth on there, and you're supposed to have a little bit of play on these, not a ton, just enough to hear them go back and forth. But if you look at what you get, is you've gotten basically a press point on the circle that was used for a pin. In this case, they're pressed on, so there's no pins. And you'll see all of them pressed on the same way. The one in the middle, I had taken off with an air chisel. It came right off. I was able to cut the back of it, and then when I did that, the whole thing just came off. So this is it. The 3 new teeth on here. These should last a long time. About 10 years if you're using this normally. If you're using it every day commercially, obviously it's not going to last 10 years. But this is something that is always missing on backhoe buckets, and a lot of people don't realize it. But if you don't put these back on, the risk you run is that you're going to ruin the shank on the bucket. Once the shank is no good or ruined, the bucket is now only usable without teeth on it, which you've got a limited life span left on the bucket. And the bucket to replace, it's not cheap, so you don't want to let the teeth wear down, and you don't want to let them fall off.